Have you ever heard of people waking up at their own funeral? Now this might sound like a plot line straight out of a horror flick, but hold on to your seats because it's more real than you might think. Welcome to Tophype, where we delve into the unusual, the incredible, and the downright unbelievable. Today we're about to take a chilling journey through 10 extraordinary instances of individuals who found themselves stirring amidst their own funeral proceedings. We'll traverse across continents and decades starting from as far back as the 1930s, right up to the recent past. From an African man whose coffin became a little too confining, to a Chinese woman who decided it was high time for a snack. So brace yourselves for a roller coaster ride of baffling resurrections and awe-inspiring comebacks. So are you ready to dive into these spine-chilling stories? Our first story takes us back to 1937 in France. Enter Angelo Hayes, a young man full of life and passion for motorcycles. One fateful day, his love for speed led to a tragic motorcycle accident, and Angelo was declared dead. Heartbreak rippled through his community as they mourned his untimely demise. His body was prepared for burial, and a somber funeral was held to bid him farewell. But as fate would have it, this was not the end for Angelo. Amid the sorrowful hymns and teary goodbyes, a shocking event unfolded. Angelo Hayes, the man believed to be dead, stirred in his coffin. He was not dead, but in a deep coma, mistaken for death. This unexpected turn of events sent waves of astonishment and relief through the mourners. Imagine the shock of the mourners when Angelo suddenly woke up. Fast forward to 2012 in China, a woman gave mourners quite a fright. Picture this. A woman, unnamed to protect her privacy, had been declared dead for 6 days. She was lying peacefully in her coffin, surrounded by grieving loved ones. Suddenly, to their utter shock and disbelief, she woke up. Yes, you heard that right. She awoke in the cold, wooden confines of her own coffin. Imagine the horror and confusion that gripped the mourners as they watched the woman they were grieving sit up in her coffin, alive and responsive. The woman, however, seemed unfazed by the chaos her resurrection had caused. She calmly climbed out of her coffin and went straight to her kitchen to cook herself a meal. Unbelievable, isn't it? Can you picture the scene? The mourners' tears of grief swiftly turning into tears of joy, their sorrow morphing into relief. What a shocking surprise it must have been for those who were mourning her. In 2013, a funeral in Zimbabwe took a surprising turn. This is the tale of Brighton Dama Zanthe, a man who woke up at his own funeral. The mourners had gathered, the eulogies were delivered, and the air was heavy with grief. But then, amidst the sorrow, a flicker of life sparked off. Brighton's leg twitched, his eyes fluttered, and a gasp escaped his lips. A hush fell over the crowd, then a collective gasp of disbelief, before the room erupted in cheers and shouts. It was a miracle. The funeral quickly turned into a celebration. The tears of grief transformed into tears of joy. The mourners danced, sang, and celebrated the resurrection of their loved one. Brighton was alive, not dead, and the funeral became a second chance at life. And so, amidst the wails and whispers of the funeral, a new day dawned for Brighton. Death had lost its grip on Brighton, much to the joy of the mourners. Our next case takes us to the USA in 2014. Imagine the shock and surprise that filled the air when Walter Williams, a man presumed dead, woke up in his own body bag just before his funeral. In a twist of events that seemed straight out of a horror movie, Walter proved that he was very much alive. The people present couldn't believe their eyes. The coroner, who had declared Walter dead, was stunned, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before him. Walter's family, who had been preparing to say their final goodbyes, were overjoyed and baffled at the same time. It was a whirlwind of emotions, a roller coaster of disbelief and relief. Yet the most perplexed of all were the funeral home workers. They had prepared countless bodies for their final journey, but a body waking up in a body bag was a first for them. The funeral home had never seen anything like it. In 2012, Brazil witnessed a shocking event. This was the year when a young boy named Kelvin Santos woke up during his own funeral. He was just 2 years old when he was declared dead following a bout of pneumonia. His grieving family gathered around his tiny casket to say their final goodbyes when the unimaginable happened. As the mourners were pouring out their hearts in sorrow, Kelvin sat up in his coffin, looked around, and asked for a glass of water. Can you imagine the stunned silence that followed? This wasn't a horror movie, but real life unfolding before their eyes. The family's grief turned into confusion and then disbelief. The funeral turned into a scene of chaos and shock as loved ones grappled with the reality of what just happened. Kelvin's father described the incident as a miracle. while others were too shocked to even speak. Never had a request for water been so shocking. In 2012, Russia had its own share of funeral surprises. Imagine this. Lyudmila Steblitskaya, a 61-year-old woman, was declared dead. Her still body was sent to the morgue, the cold, sterile environment echoing the finality of her supposed end. But fate had a different script. Lyudmila did not remain in eternal slumber. Instead, she woke up much to her own horror and disbelief. Imagine the chilling dread that seeped into her bones as she found herself in the morgue, surrounded by the lifeless and the departed. But the real shock was reserved for the medical staff. Picture their faces, the color draining as they discovered the deceased Lyudmila was very much alive. The disbelief, the shock, the relief, a whirlpool of emotions all at once. This tale of Lyudmila Steblitskaya is a stark reminder that sometimes life can be stranger than fiction, and death not always absolute. Who would have thought that the morgue would be the place for such a surprise? These cases are truly mind-boggling, aren't they? We've journeyed through 10 spine-chilling stories where the line between life and death blurred and left us all in awe. From Angelo Hayes' miraculous revival in France, 1937, after a motorcycle accident showing us that sometimes the human body can surprise us with its resilience, to the unnamed Chinese woman in 2012, who rose from her coffin to cook a meal, proving that life's routines can be more potent than death itself. Then we had Brighton Dama Zanthe from Zimbabwe in 2013, who startled his mourners by waking up at his own funeral. And who could forget Walter Williams from the USA in 2014, whose return from the dead left his family and the entire medical community stunned. We also discussed Kelvin Santos from Brazil in 2012, and how his sudden revival during his funeral left everyone in shock and disbelief. And last, but certainly not least, was Lyudmila Steblitskaya from Russia in 2012, who woke up in a morgue after spending 2 days in a state of clinical death. All these stories may sound more like excerpts from a horror novel than real-life incidents, but they are indeed true. It's fascinating, and a tad eerie to see how life can sometimes outwit death in the most unexpected ways. It's important to remember, though, that these are not supernatural occurrences but rather unusual medical phenomena. They can occur due to a variety of reasons, including catalepsy, a condition where the body can mimic the signs of death, or Lazarus syndrome, a rare medical condition where spontaneous return of circulation occurs after failed attempts at resuscitation. So, the next time you're at a funeral, don't be too surprised if the deceased decides to wake up. It's a rare occurrence, but as we've seen today, not an impossible one. Life can be stranger than fiction, and these stories are living proof of that. Keep being curious, keep exploring, and keep learning. There's always more to discover in this fascinating world of ours.